Okay, it is now time for our questions from kids, and today's question is from Titus C, and he asks, how can I tell if things are symbolic or literal? Wow, very good question, Titus, and kind of a complicated question too, but I'm gonna do my best to answer it. So before I get into the answer, I'm first going to explain to you guys what Titus is talking about here, because you might be a little bit confused by the question. So Titus is talking about when we read the Bible. There are different parts of the Bible that are symbolic, and there are different parts that are literal. So I'm going to give you an example of both to help you understand what those two words mean, because they're kind of big words that we don't use a lot. So first, in Psalm chapter 18, verse 2, it says, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold." Okay, so this is an example of a symbolic verse because it says, "The Lord is my rock." So is God actually our rock? If I went and picked up a rock outside, would I be like, oh my goodness, this is God? No, that's not what it's talking about. It's not saying that God is literally a rock. It's using a rock as a symbol to help us understand who God is. So rocks are solid and they don't move easily, and we can hide behind them to protect ourselves. And so in the same way, God is solid and firm, and He is the foundation in our life, and He can't change no matter what happens, and He also protects us. And the verse also says that He is like a shield. And so God isn't literally a shield, but He protects us against harm just like a shield does. So this is a verse that is symbolic. It's not literal. But then there are verses in the Bible or stories in the Bible that are literal. For example, the story of Noah and the ark, when it says that Noah built an ark and then a flood came and it flooded the whole earth and everything died except for Noah and his family and the two types of animals he brought on the ark. That is literal. That actually happened. Noah was a real man who actually built an ark, and God actually sent a flood over the whole world to kill everything except for Noah and his family. So that's not just a symbol of, oh, a flood actually has a deeper meaning behind it. No, that literally happened. So that's what Titus is talking about here. He's asking, when we read our Bible, how do we know if something is literal or something is symbolic? And that is a really good question. And you know what? It's really important to know as well, because this question is all about how we interpret the Bible. And it's important for us to know how to interpret the Bible correctly, because we want to understand what it is that God is telling us, right? So there's a couple of different things that we can do to help us with these confusing questions of, is it literal or symbolic? And the first thing is we need to know what genre we're reading. So a genre is the type of book that you're reading. So you can read fiction books, which means that it didn't actually happen, or you can read nonfiction, which means it really happened, or there's fantasy or sci-fi. There's different types of literature that we can read, and the Bible is the same way. It's made up of 66 books, but not every book is the same genre. Some of them are narratives. A narrative is explaining a story that really happened. Some of the books are poetry, and guess what? Psalms, that verse that I read earlier, that is poetry, and Proverbs is poetry as well. And then there are letters in the Bible. Remember, the Apostle Paul wrote letters to the different people. There are the Gospels. There's apocalyptic, that's a really big word, apocalyptic books of the Bible that talk about the end times. And there's prophecy that tells about the future. And so there's all these different types of genres. And it's important when we read a book in the Bible to figure out what genre it is. And we can do this by researching it, by looking it up in other books or on the internet to figure out what kind of genre we're reading. For example, in Genesis, when I talked about Noah and the flood, that's a narrative. It's talking about real things that happened. But then Psalms and Proverbs are poetry. David and Solomon and the different people who wrote Psalms and Proverbs, they were writing in a poetic way, which means that we read it differently than we would read Genesis. It's the same as when you read a novel like Narnia, for example, or Harry Potter. You would read that very differently than you would read like a science textbook, right? Because Narnia isn't a real place, even though I really wish that it was. Narnia was written and it's just made up. It's fantasy. It's not real. But a textbook that's explaining to us about science maybe, or a textbook that's talking about the history of Canada and back when Canada was founded, that really happened. So you don't read those books in the same way. And the same is with the Bible. We need to read each book differently and figure out what genre it is. So I hope that that makes sense. So that's one way that we can help us know if something is symbolic or literal, because a lot of poetry is symbolic, but a lot of narrative like Genesis is literal. It actually happened. Then the second thing we can do is figure out if something is a metaphor or not. Now, what is a metaphor? Well, a metaphor is when we explain something that we already know, or compare something that we already know to something that we maybe don't understand yet. So what I mean by that is in that verse in Psalms, Psalm chapter 18, verse 2, the author is using a rock as a metaphor. He's saying that the Lord is my rock, but the Lord isn't actually a rock. So that's called a metaphor. He's using something that we understand, a rock, to explain something that we sometimes are confused about or don't understand, like the Lord. So that is a metaphor. And Jesus used metaphors a lot in the New Testament. Remember when he says, I am the bread of life? Now, is Jesus actually bread? No, of course not. He was a human being. He had a body just like you and me. He wasn't actually bread. But what he was saying is that he gives us everything that we need. He gives us nutrients and wisdom, and he teaches us just like we need bread in our life. Bread is important. He's saying that he's like food because food fills us up and it gives us what we need to survive. And the same is with Jesus. He is like food. He gives us everything that we need. He fills us up. Or Jesus said, I am the door. Now, is Jesus actually a door? No, of course not. This was a metaphor because remember, Jesus is the only way to heaven. So he's saying he's the door that we walk through to get to heaven. He's the only way to get there. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So it's like when you go into a room and there's only one door to get into that room. Jesus is saying he is like a door. He's the only way to get to heaven. So these are all metaphors, and that's how we understand more if something is literal or if something is symbolic. And in order to understand all of this, sometimes we just have to read the Bible over and over again. And as we grow older and we become wiser and more knowledgeable, God will help us and reveal to us what is literal and what is symbolic. We can also do lots of research or ask questions to people who are older than you, people who you know have studied the Bible. Guess what? There are parts of the Bible that I don't understand. And I ask my dad lots of questions because my dad has studied the Bible more than me. Or you guys are asking me questions because you're younger than me, and there are some things that I know that you don't know, but there are some things that I don't know either. And every time I read the Bible, I learn more and more about what God is teaching. And so that's one final thing that I wanted to tell you guys. There are things about the Bible that we will probably never understand. There are some really confusing things, like in the book of Daniel or in the book of Revelation. I'm reading the Revelation right now, and it is very confusing. But part of reading the Bible is trusting and putting our faith in God and knowing that even if we don't understand something, it's there for a reason. And as we get older and we study it more, we'll start to understand it more and more. But there will be some things that we maybe never understand, but that's okay. God doesn't expect us to understand everything all at once. One day we are going to go up to heaven and we are going to, God will reveal more to us there, right? But right now, our human brains can't fully understand everything about God because God is this awesome, amazing being that we as humans can never fully understand. So sometimes we read a part of the Bible and we go, oh, that's really confusing. But we can pray and ask God that he will help us understand it, but also pray and say, okay, God, I trust you. Even if I don't fully understand this, I'm still going to trust that you are good and that you are truthful and that everything that you say in the Bible is true. So I hope that that was able to answer your question, Titus, and that it wasn't too confusing for the rest of you as well. And that, that you guys will continue asking questions. And I just wanted to note one final thing. There is a really cool YouTube channel called The Bible Project, and I highly recommend checking it out. It helps us understand how to read the Bible more. So if there's a specific book in the Bible that you're reading, you can look up, let's say that you're reading the book of Daniel. You can look up Daniel on the Bible Project, and there will be videos on how to interpret and how to understand Daniel a little bit more. Because again, the people who run the Bible Project, they're smarter than me, and they've done more studying than I have. So they help me understand more too. And there's also different videos on how to read different genres of the Bible. So there's a video on how to read narratives. There's a video on how to read poetry. There's a video on how to read apocalyptic literature. All of these big words that I'm talking about. So make sure to check out that channel with your parents. Make sure that you watch it with your parents so that they can make sure that it's a video that is good for you. And those are videos that I love. So I wanted to pass that information on to you guys as well. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's Rock at Home, and I will hopefully see you guys soon. Have a great week and see you guys next time. Bye.